I testified about this in front of the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee this past summer. Dr. Mills was there with me. There was quite a contingent of low-carb promoters, and some of them were doctors, and some of them, they all seem pretty angry. I'll tell you, the plant-based eating does not, or the paleo diet doesn't do much for their personalities. They had to be told to sit down 3 or 4 times, talk past their time, so they're not a very well-mannered bunch. But I was toward the end, and here's what I said. One of the things we have to be very careful of in medicine and in nutritional medicine is that we don't only look at short-term results, because sometimes things that work great in the short term don't work very well in the long term, all right? So if the only thing you're going to worry about is what your blood markers look like at the end of 30 days, I actually made this suggestion to the committee. I said there's some things we should consider that work really well for weight loss and cholesterol in 30 days. One of them is cocaine addiction. And this is the thing, have you ever seen a really fat cocaine addict and they have really low cholesterol levels? Then people were laughing. I'll tell you something else that works really well is chemotherapy. People lose weight, their numbers come down. Well, obviously, these are, I'm being facetious deliberately, because if we really don't care about the long term, then let's just throw anything on the table that makes your numbers better in the short term, and where does that leave us? Temporarily a little bit better, and in the long term, a whole lot worse. So all the studies that you're citing, I'm familiar with them. And they look at what happens to people when they eat a low-carb diet for 30 days, and yeah, their glucose levels drop. But what happens to those people 5 years later? Most of them aren't eating that diet because they can't tolerate it. And so they go on to something else that's equally deadly. So that would be my first comment about it.
I could just continue along the same line of the point you just made, that we do give more credence to studies that follow large numbers of people, hundreds of thousands of people, and they track them for decades, 20 or 30 more years. And the question is, are there studies out there that track large numbers of people, whole populations, and follow them for decades and look at hard endpoints? Because the soft endpoints are things like you lost weight, your cholesterol went down, your triglyceride improved. But we give more credence to look at hard endpoints. Did the person die? What age did they die at? Did they have a heart attack or did they get cancer? And here's what the studies do show. And I think that I could accurately say that all the studies, and I said all, I think I can say that with accuracy, all the studies that look at hard endpoints show that as animal products go up in the diet, in a dose-dependent relationship as they go to higher levels, so do the hard endpoints like heart attacks, strokes, cancers, and deaths. So there's really no controversy here. It's people just talking, and we want to look at what extends lifespan and gives people the most opportunity to live a long, happy, and healthy life. And we have tremendous information from science in modern times. And we can do better than the caveman did millions of years ago. And by the way, we are biologically very similar to the other primates. And at what point in human history to decide, oh, that's the diet that's right for us? What about those hundreds of thousands of years? In other words, we're designed like primates. We're meant to eat a primate-style diet. And we live longest with all the protective factors when we eat our diet primarily of plants. That doesn't mean a vegan diet in the modern world optimizes every micronutrient. But that's why we have the opportunity today to measure blood and to account for individual differences and to make modifications to make sure people do it properly and correctly and are not deficient in anything they need. So we do have a unique opportunity in human history right now. We can get the best of both worlds. And the Seventh-day Adventist Health Study 2 study did compare people eating just 1 or 2 servings of meat a week compared to those eating none. And they found that even people eating a little bit of animal products did have a higher risk of cardiovascular death. So the facts are we have better advice we can offer people with a whole lot of information to make our judgments, to base our judgments on. And that when we're very happy and enthusiastic about that information we have available to us today.
Yeah, there's a massive experiment that's been going on all around you. Just look at how everybody's eating. most people are eating animal-rich diets, and you can see the consequences of that behavior. And you can see the changes in that when you change people to whole plant food diet. We have the, luxury of actually living with our patients at the True North Health Center. And so you see day by day what happens as soon as you change the diet. It's profound, it's predictable. And so I don't, even beyond all the excellent research that Dr. Fuhrman's, alluding to, you can just open your eyes and look around and tell the truth about, what's real as far as animal food intake is concerned.
There's a lot to unpack here, so let me see what I can say and still be allowed to stay on the stage. First of all, I'm personally am losing my patience with idiots. And and just because somebody says something does not mean it's true. Otherwise, we'd be forced to take Rudy Giuliani seriously. And I don't think, as my esteemed colleagues have all pointed out, the science is clear and it's settled on what diet is best for human beings. So I don't think we need to waste our time sitting up here debating foolishness like the so-called paleo diet or keto, because we know that those diets are unhealthy. We know they cause more disease. That's like me sitting up debating someone who wants to talk about bringing back slavery. I don't need to do that. That's been settled. Okay, so I don't need to talk about feeding people bone cartilage and grease and lard and fat. That's going to kill them. So no, this conference is to talk about and educate people on the benefits of being plant-based, not to waste our time debating things that have been long settled. So that's why we don't waste our time with that nonsense. And the other thing is, if you watch TV, you know that about every other week they come up with a new disease and they give it an acronym, and they pretend that just because they gave it an acronym, it's actually a thing. Paleo is not a thing, okay? It has a name, but it's not real. If you attended my talk today, I alluded to the fact that human beings using Stone Age technology cannot be efficient enough to kill enough animals to subsist on an animal food-based diet. We're just not that efficient. Even the most efficient hunters and predators, tigers, lions, they only make a kill about once every 7 to 10 days. So how the heck is some weak little barefoot human being with a sharpened spear going to do any better than that? It's ludicrous. So the idea that people were running around eating all this meat is made up nonsense. And so when people come to me with that stuff, I tell them, you know what? You have my permission to eat meat every single day for every single meal, because the sooner you kick off this earth, the better off the rest of us will be.
When this conference is over, a lot of people will be motivated to learn more about health and nutrition. And there are a lot of sources. You can go to a nutritionist, a registered dietitian, a medical doctor. You can look at university studies, medical journals, clinical trials, government agencies like the USDA and FDA, what politicians say, what media says, what the scientific studies say, what the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, formerly the American Dietetic Association, says. You can listen to the companies themselves. Which one of these people should we listen to? In other words, which when these people speak, should we say, okay, great, that's what my nutritionist said something, my dietitian, who of these sources of information should we listen to or not listen to based on everything that you're aware of?
None of them. So here's the thing. This is something I've been talking about for a long time, this informed decision-making concept, where you look at anybody who's telling you anything about anything in medicine, a procedure you should have or a diet that you should eat or whatever, And what you really want to do is look at the evidence for the benefits that you're going to get, the risks that you're going to take, and determine if it's worth it. And when you think about it, this is the way you buy everything. I mean, I've never met anybody who says, yeah, you know, you got a new car? Yeah, it's the one the salesman told me I had to drive. I really don't like it that much, but you know, I have to drive it. People don't let other people tell them what to do. They don't live in houses that other people tell them to buy, and they don't drive cars other people tell them to buy. So I think you look at health professionals as advisors, and you check into what they're saying. And sometimes when you do this, you find out that the person that you're thinking of listening to doesn't know what they're talking about. So you get rid of that person, you go on to the next person. Everybody at this table, I think, qualifies to give advice based on the fact that we back up what we say with science that's reliable. But if you're looking in your own community, don't look for a guru. Take responsibility yourself for checking things out before you do it. And it's interesting, I ask people, why are you taking this supplement? My cousin sells it. Why are you eating this diet? My neighbor did keto and told me about it when we were mowing the lawn one day, and I decided to do it too. These are not good decisions, not good reasons to do things. But it's also not good to eat a keto diet because a dietitian told you to do it, or to eat a paleo diet because a medical doctor told you to do it. So forget about the source of the information and verify the information itself, because looking for gurus is why a lot of people are in trouble right now. They believed what people told them.
I agree 100%. I always tell people, when I tell you something, assume I'm Sarah Sanders and I'm just making it up as I go along, and Google it, research it for yourself. But I think the ultimate test is, number one, make sure whoever you talk to is plant-based and knows what they're talking about. But you ultimately are going to have to experience it for yourself. And the reason I call Gary up here is, yeah, I know, man, I'm just dragging you out. We had just a spontaneous conversation today about the fact that Gary's one of the AV guys that, because he was stuck here working like, you know, well, a field hand is probably not a good example. He basically didn't have time to go out and get what he usually eats, so he started eating the vegan food. And Gary, just kind of share with them what you shared with me, man, please.
Go, Gary. Okay. So what I was sharing with him was, and what I shared with a lot of people at the conference, is when I first took on this assignment, I thought, you know, vegan, I was like, these people are crazy. Like, there's no way I'm gonna sit and eat plants. And because we, like as he said, we don't have time to go out and get food. We are basically eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner here. I just began to eat the food. And I didn't give it any thoughts. I have high blood pressure. I'm pre-diabetic. I'm taking medication for all of that. And after several days of eating the food, I began to feel better. I did. I started having more energy. I mean, the first day we were here, we did 36 hours straight. And normally, if I was eating my regular, diet of chicken or whatever, I normally eat, I would have been exhausted. But I feel a lot better. I feel a lot more energetic. And I can attest that I think there's something to this. I don't know anything. I don't know anything about the vegan diet. I know nothing about it, except for the fact that we were here, we were stuck here, and we're eating the food, and I feel a lot better. I do. I honestly do. So.
Thanks for letting me talk. That's the ultimate test. Your body will tell you. That was, and what I shared with him was, when I went plant-based as a teenager, 3 days into it, I woke up and I'm like, what the hell? I've got more energy, I need less sleep, I feel different, and I feel better. And that is what's going to convince you and show you that this is the way that we should all be eating. The proof is in the plantains.
Regarding whole food plant-based diets, it seems to make an incredible amount of sense regarding weight loss, heart disease, stroke. Seems to make perfect sense. But the question of blood sugar or type 2 diabetes seems a little less clear because fruit and lots of beans and whole grains and sweet potatoes does seem like it could raise and does raise your blood sugar. So if you take a glucometer and measure your blood sugar every day, it does go up if you eat a giant bowl of chickpeas and quinoa and sweet potatoes. So if you're fighting type 2 diabetes or prediabetes, should you cut down some? I mean, the greens I know don't affect it, but should you keep your portions of cooked beans, whole grains, potatoes, squashes down, and fruits down somewhat, or is that not a concern?
So if your goal is to actually correct the diabetes, you have to correct the insulin resistance that causes the diabetes. And as Dr. Fuhrman mentioned earlier, the things you do that have short-term facility don't necessarily have anything to do with getting well. What our observation has certainly been, if you are a type 2 diabetic and you're willing to do really dangerous and radical things like eat well and exercise, go to bed on time, the vast majority of people will be able to improve the condition mostly to the point where they can eliminate the need for medication and normalize their blood sugar levels. And you're going to do that with a whole plant food, SOS-free diet, abundant sleep, and regular exercise. Now, it's true that some foods are going to push your short-term sugars higher than others. Fresh fruits, grains may have a higher glycemic response than would be beans or vegetable materials. And so if your concern is regulating short-term blood sugar levels, then you would go on as much green vegetable foods, salads, steamed vegetables, beans, things that have a lower glycemic response, and you'd maybe minimize or avoid the fruits or other, especially any type of processed foods. If you do that long enough to achieve optimum weight, you're likely to find yourself optimizing blood sugar levels, and often to the point where you can become much more flexible with your diet and still maintain desirable sugar levels. So short term, you can certainly play around with glycemic response of individual foods. Long term, it may become academic because once you normalize your blood sugar levels, you can eat a whole plant food SOS-free diet, usually with reasonable abandon.
Thank you. I'll just add one thing. Let's assume that I'm on a keto diet now and I'm eating animal products to control my sugars. But because I'm not eating much fruit or grains in the diet and I'm eating mostly meat or things that don't have glucose in them, well, the saturated fat and the high exposure to the hormones from animal products deforms the insulin receptors. And actually, they're called cavelins and cavins, which are the spaces in the cells that house the insulin receptor, and they change in shape when the membrane of the cell when the fat in this cell membrane gets more saturated from animal product consumption. So now when this person on a keto diet is controlling their sugars from avoiding animal products, they've made their body more insulin resistant, and now if they have a piece of fruit, they're going to spike their sugar way up through the roof. Or if they have a piece of butternut squash or something, they'll have a high glucose, and they'll say, "Look, told you when I have those foods, my sugar goes through the roof." Yeah, but you're eating all this fat, saturated fat on your diet, so you ruin your cell membranes and you've ruined your insulin receptors. So what we're talking here is restoring integrity to the cell membranes, to the insulin receptors, and to the immune function, T cell function. In other words, the body works as a unit. And diabetes is a disease of inflammation, of insulin resistance, of extra body fat, of lack of phytonutrients. There's a whole bunch of factors involved. And we've found that utilizing this plant-based approach that is also glycemically favorable, we're not feeding people processed foods and white flour and white rice and things like that. And also, we're keeping the oils we use, I should have said that wrong. The fats we use contain full fiber with them, so the fats are absorbing into the bloodstream very slowly. When you put oils in the diet, the fats get absorbed very rapidly in the bloodstream. And then the fat interferes with insulin, makes you more insulin resistant at the same time. So the fact that the diet is oil-free, high in fiber, and we're burning the calories we're burning the calories off for our basic metabolic needs. We're not storing them as fat, which changes the metabolic processes of the body. Let me give you an example. I tell people who come to my clinic that when they're on the program and they're overweight, if they're not losing 2 pounds a week, if they're more than 30 pounds overweight, that is, then they're not on the program. Because a person that's overweight has extra cytokines and lipokines being eliminated from the fat supply, they've got insulin resistance. But we see, even if the person is still overweight, if they're following the diet carefully and they're dropping weight, their insulin resistance comes down while they're still overweight. Their amount of estrogen production comes down while they're still overweight. We see benefits improving while they're still overweight because they're eating right and dropping their weight and their insulin receptors are being fixed. Oh, thank you. I think I summed up enough right now, and our group experience is that our joy is taking care of thousands of people with diabetes and heart disease and these conditions and watching their diabetes go away. And the skills we've developed as physicians is knowing how much to cut back on the insulin needs of a type 1 when they switch this way of eating. How fast should we take the medications off? Which medications come off first? That's the specialty over the last 3 decades that we've developed to be able to know predictively how much the person is going to improve from the diets that we prescribe, and the effects that we see in practice are incredibly rewarding and miraculous for both the patient and the doctor, and that's why we're so thrilled and excited about what we do.
In the past, I believe, Pam, when people asked you about plant-based diets, you recommended it, but you didn't insist that people were 100% vegan. And Dr. Fuhrman, I believe the same, I don't know how many years ago. If someone came to you today and said, what should I eat? Do you tell them they need to be 100% plant-based, or do you say, well, what exactly do you say? Do they have to be 100% plant-based, or do you say they could have animal products in some amount? You and Dr. Fuhrman, yes.
We don't recommend 100% plant-based diet as our general recommendation. The blue zones, plenty of people out there living to 100 don't eat a vegan diet. I'm vegan. I'm a pretty public vegan, and so it's a choice that I made. But one of the things that I recognized when I started my business 25 years ago is the difference between buzz and traction. Traction is when you're actually gaining traction in the marketplace. And ours is a membership organization. So we see what happens to people over a long period of time, a lot of them, in a lot of different states of health and different states of motivation and everything else. So our idea is we start with a diet that we know is health promoting, that results in people getting well. I mean, the CHIP program has never been vegan, and there are 26 articles published in medical journals with the CHIP program showing that people reverse their cardiovascular disease and their diabetes. Ornish's program was not vegan in the beginning, and I'm not sure it still is. And he has published studies showing that these patients get better, even prostate cancer patients. So we start with that. Some people become what I call the accidental vegans. They make up their mind to do it later on. But what we've seen in 25 years is we have seen people who are able to sustain what is, by most standards, a pretty radical diet change for very long periods of time that isn't perfect. And that, to me, is more important than perfection for a few weeks and cycling in and out of the perfection. In fact, most of the people coming to us right now have been making attempts to do this. And part of the problem is not knowing what to do and being on medications they shouldn't have been on. But a lot of the problem is that they hold themselves to a standard which they can't seem to achieve and maintain. And then they fail. And then they cycle through and they start again. And that's the cycle we're trying to prevent and pull people out of. So, so that's what we're doing. I would rather see less perfection and longer sustainability. And by the way, our people get well too. We have thousands of people. We've worked with over 100,000 people in 33 countries. And our track record and our files are filled with people who eat less than perfect diets, who are doing very, very well in terms of low numbers, no repeat heart attacks, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my...
Well, I've written books and I've put out television shows, and I do advocate a diet that's nutrient-rich and and plant-based, but it's plant-dense and plant-rich. But I do have said to people that they don't have to do it strictly on a vegan diet. They could use animal products as a condiment a few times a week, just a few ounces here and there. But I don't advocate that. It's that I don't want to turn a person off from jumping into this program if they don't want to be vegan at the very beginning. I want to let them know that that's not the critical factor of being a strict vegan. Is not necessary to enter or begin this process, because I want more people to enter it and see how healing this can be. However, when people come to my retreat, and they're usually there for a couple of months, and they're not there spending all that money and all that time because they just want to try to eat some healthy food and get some recipes. They're there because they're really very sick. And they're food addicts, and they have obesity, and they have diabetes, and they have heart disease, or they have cancer, or they have psoriasis, or they have serious illnesses. And in those cases, we're not starting people, giving them the option of having a little bit of animal products in their diet. These are people who have serious conditions. And I feel that in those cases, it's like saying to them, do you want to drop 15 pounds this month and maximally reverse your psoriatic arthritis, or do you want to slow that down and only lose 5 pounds and maybe not get well? Or do you want to, in other words, if you have your cancer, should we give you all out with everything we can do to make you well, or should we just modify that a little bit? So of course I'm not going to offer that. So I prefer to offer the full vegan nutritarian kind of approach, and I don't offer anything other than that when people come to my retreat, because they're there for a reason, and we want to give them what's very best. But in the public outreach, we're going to show people the advantage of doing this all the way. But if they choose not to and want to use an animal product on occasion or in very small amounts, that doesn't have to dissuade them from entering the program.
So I'd like to ask you 3 questions on a similar topic. Number 1. What does an adult moose eat to grow a rack of antlers in about 3 months that weigh about 85 pounds and are made out of solid bone? Number 2, why is cow's milk high in calcium if cows don't drink milk? Where do cows get their calcium from? Number 3, does dairy give us stronger bones? And number 4, how do we avoid osteoporosis or brittle bones?
God, we look like those people in an old Scope commercial passing the bottle around. Okay. Clearly, okay. I love the question about the moose antlers because, Alan, you're about 6 feet, right? If we flayed him and took all the meat and skin off his skeleton would weigh about 25 pounds, and it took him 20 years to get that skeleton. But a moose can grow antlers made out of solid bone in 3 months that weigh 85 pounds, eating nothing but green plants. Proof positive, there's plenty of calcium in green plants.
That's kind of cool about the moose thing. I'm learning new things here on this panel. Because I was just in Wyoming 2 weeks ago, and I was actually in a store looking at all these antlers, and I was hitting them and going, that was like a rock. This is rock hard. It's they carry, yeah, it's amazing. Anyway, all right, well, back to the real world. Yes, we're talking here about as we age, if we're going to live longer, and we're going to push the envelope of human longevity to 95 or 100, we want to have our full mental faculties intact. We want to have our musculoskeletal system working and our bones working too, right? And so that's why we think ahead and we do the right things when we're younger to keep our bones protected as we age. And it's not all just about what we eat either. It's about exercising regularly and the right type of exercise. And so it's also about, even things like alignment. Like, for example, if your feet are severely pronated in, it could make you have more tibial torsion where your knees go in, and that could put more stress on your hip and more likely to have more weight on the medial tibial condyle and more likely to develop osteoarthritis of your knee. And so we're just trying to give people a holistic approach where they're eating right, they're getting enough, as Alan said, getting enough sleep at night, and they're exercising appropriately to maintain the right amount of muscle mass and strength as they age. And I'll tell you what I found, that doing this way of eating keeps your youthful vigor and your strength and your stamina and ability to enjoy sports and do the exercises as you get older easily. And our work with athletes also show that we prolong their careers and their enjoyment of athletic activity, and their bodies don't age as much. So what we're seeing in the conventional society where people get to be a certain age, like 65, and they can't exercise, and their bones are gone, and their joints are bad, and they can't keep them, and they start to lose muscle mass and bone mass, because you know, of course, that you don't just lose bone mass, you lose muscle mass and bone mass, because muscle and bone grow together and they atrophy together. So osteopenia or osteoporosis is not a it's not a disease of the bones, it's a degree of the muscles and the bones that work together. And the way we keep our bones strong is by keeping our muscles strong. And the way we keep our muscles strong is by keeping healthy so we can keep our muscles strong. So it's a little bit complicated, but when we do everything right, it makes everything else that we put into the mix work better.
So if you want to have strong bones, our bones were designed to live as long as, or to function as long as we are alive, but we don't take care of them very well. And we have been told, I mean, I used to believe it, milk builds strong bones, right? So I drank milk and ate a lot of cheese and ended up fat, and it didn't work out so well for me. But the point is that I think there are 4 things you have to do to build strong bones and a strong body. And I agree with what you said. It's really muscles and bones. People who have muscular bodies rarely have crumbling bones. You don't see this in Olympic athletes, for example. So I think exercise is a key, because exercise triggers, particularly weight-bearing exercise, triggers the bone remodeling process. Eating a health-promoting diet, including a low-acid residue diet, so that your body isn't dissolving your bones to buffer acidity. So a whole foods, plant-based diet. Sunlight, because it helps you produce vitamin D. And your gastrointestinal tract has to be in good shape. I mean, 2 common causes of thinning bones are celiac disease, gastrointestinal tract not working well, and there's a fix for that. You have to change your diet, and probiotics are helpful. And taking drugs like corticosteroids that damage the microbiome and interfere with absorption of nutrients. So if you take care of those 4 things, you have a very good chance of living in your own home independently, strong enough to pick something up off the floor and tie your shoes and get something out of the cabinet and prepare your own food, not ending up in some kind of nursing home facility until the end of your life. And I think that's what we all really want, is not to end up warehoused someplace. So if you want to keep your independence, that involves a strong musculoskeletal system. I think those are the 4 most important things to pay attention to.
My mother, when she turned 92 years old, told me that she realized that she had outlived all 52 of her lifelong friends, that they had all died. Many of them used to tease her mercilessly about her diet. And she said, "Alan, you need to warn your patients. If they're going to do this diet, make younger friends."
So I got a call once, about a few months ago, from someone furious. And they said, "I just watched Joel Fuhrman's video, and he just said to avoid salt. And that's not accurate. We absolutely need salt. You need the right kind of salt. And if you get the right salt, it's a very important thing, and you must have salt. And you got to take that, edit that video, because it's not true. Salt is important. It's just got to be the right kind of salt." What do you guys think about salt?
So I should start out with the answer anyway. And I want to say to Alan that my mother's also 93 years old. And she took her a long time to come around and eat healthier too. But anyway, one of the things we consider critical to saving human life on this planet and stopping the vast amount of people dying of heart attacks and strokes is this incredible addiction and craziness we've developed with eating so much salt. I mean, the American Heart Association recommends that when people have heart disease, they cut their salt intake down to 1,500 milligrams a day. And I'm saying, you mean, I guess we should do that with smokers too. People with lung cancer should cut their cigarettes back once they find out they have lung cancer. The reason why this doesn't work is because the damage from salt occurs insidiously and slowly all through our lives. And salt doesn't just raise our blood pressure. It also damages the endothelial, reduces nitric oxide production, causes inflammation in the interior wall of your blood vessels, causes microvascular hemorrhaging, increasing the risk of autoimmune disease, suppresses T helper cells, increasing the risk of autoimmune conditions, increases risk of stomach cancer. What I'm saying right now is that our bodies are designed to consume the perfect amount of sodium that's in natural foods, and we truly need sodium, but sodium is an ingredient in all natural plants. And I'm also saying that a low-salt diet is not a low-salt diet, it's a high-salt diet. Because the studies on the American Heart Association recommendations of 1,500 milligrams a day show that death rates go down as they approach 1,500 milligrams a day, yes, but they continue to follow the data. As they go down from 1,500 to 1,000, heart attack rates and stroke rates continue to go down. They don't stop at 1,500 milligrams a day. You know, what I'm also saying that the salt years matter. In other words, if let's say just for example, if we agree that 1,000 milligrams of sodium today is appropriate for most people. Now I know that there are various medical conditions and people who lose more salt in their urine and people with POTS and all types of diseases that require sodium, but that's not talking about 99% of us who have normal kidney and salt metabolism. For us, 1,000 milligrams a day of sodium is probably the upper limit of normal for our long-term health. So if you go to 2,000 for 10 years, that's 10 salt years. If you go 3,000 a day, that's 2,000 above the rate, the normal amount of 1,000. 3,000 above the normal rate of 1,000 is 2 salt years. For 50 years of your life, that's 100 salt years. You're going to be at risk of stroke of those 100 salt years if you ate that much salt, 3,000 a day for 50 years. What I'm saying is you're going to pay a price for your lifetime exposure of salt, and it changes your sympathetic tone in your brain. It changes the behavior of your blood vessels. You don't just cut out salt and have these diseases go away. When you cut out smoking, it takes 15 years for the damage from smoking to start to resolve itself. When you cut out salt, it takes years for the damage to go away, not weeks. The reason why we see people cut out salt and they're not do well is because they're waiting till they have advanced heart disease and heart failure, and then they cut out salt, and they're cutting out salt at such a late stage in the pathology that at that point it doesn't matter that much, and they have so much damage from the high salt diet that at that point it is a stress to their system to lower salt that radically. What I'm saying is it's a confusing subject matter, but if we really want to have maximal effects at reducing strokes and heart attacks and other diseases, remember that a diet is better not having any additional salt over and above what's in natural foods. And Himalayan salts and Celtic salts and salt from the Rock of Gibraltar, the bottom of the deepest sea or the backside of the moon, it doesn't make a difference because they all have 2,200 milligrams of sodium per teaspoon, not per tablespoon, per teaspoon. And when you throw in an extra couple thousand milligrams of sodium to your body every day, you pay a price. And one more thing. People on vegan diets, on healthy vegan diets, can die of hemorrhagic strokes because the type of stroke caused by atherosclerosis and clots are called embolic or ischemic strokes, not hemorrhagic stroke. The atherosclerotic process that increases your risk of a ischemic stroke may add some thickening and protection to the brain, to the fragile blood vessels in the brain as they age, against the effects of a high salt diet and high blood pressure, causing rupture of fragile vessels in the brain as people get over on otherwise plant-based diets. For example, in Asian countries, in these who eat these high salt diets, there's 10 times the risk of having a hemorrhagic stroke than there is in the United States, where we eat burgers and bacon. And also, it's also true that very low cholesterol levels are linked to higher risk of hemorrhagic stroke, not lower risk. What I'm saying right now is that if we want to wipe out all strokes, meaning hemorrhagic strokes and ischemic or embolic strokes, it's not enough to just eat right, we also have to eat right and not salt our food. So you can still have a hemorrhagic stroke on a diet that otherwise is protective against clot or atherosclerosis. I could say much more, but I think I'll stop here and let other people comment.
So we talk about a whole plant food SOS-free diet. SOS stands for the International Symbol of Danger, and it includes salt, oil, and sugar. So lots of people are saying, okay, we'll get rid of the oil. Some people get rid of the sugar and refined carbohydrates, but you also have to, as Dr. Fuhrman says, get rid of the salt. Salt does something else in addition to the things that were just mentioned, and that's that it stimulates passive overeating. So even though there's no calories in salt, salt helps make you get fat.
As specifically as possible, what exactly should we eat? Name it as direct, as specific as you can, in 3 minutes or 2 minutes, what exactly for the next year, for people who want to be healthy, have energy, lose weight, feel great, what specifically, more specifically than just whole food plant-based diet, what specifically are you recommending that people eat to be full, satisfied, and healthy?
So it would be a whole plant food SOS-free diet made up of fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, and that's it. I have a really simple way for people to know if they look at any product, should they have it or not. If they get very quiet and go inside themselves and they ask themselves, do I really, really, really want whatever it is? And the answer is truly yes, you know. You can't have it. You get nothing.
Okay, interaction time again. What is probably the nastiest, vilest substance you can think of that you would not want to put your hand in? Can I hear some words, huh? Vomit. Vomit, okay, yeah, that's pretty gross. But something a little worse than that. Poop, right? A fresh cow patty. And then maybe some like really nasty dirt, right? So what if I scooped up like half of a fresh cow patty and then went out and got some dirt and mixed it all up and took a pinto bean and stuck it down in there? What would happen? I would get this pristine plant that was perfect. That's how powerful beans are. So whatever you eat, make sure legumes are a regular part of your diet because they are incredibly powerful and healthful organisms to eat. And they impart that to your body when you eat them. So include legumes in your diet at least 3 to 4 times a week, whole grains, fresh green leafy vegetables, and color. You know what? It's like God likes color. He doesn't want you living in a neighborhood with all one color people. He doesn't want you eating a plate that has only one color. I tell people the only white things at your dinner table should be the tablecloth and the people eating the food. Everything else needs to have some color.
Okay, our 4 major food groups are fruit, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. And then we use a pyramid formation, so you can see that the stuff at the top, you eat a lot less of than the stuff at the bottom. But those are the foundational foods, using starchy foods as the calorie density part of the plate, and then lots of fruits and vegetables. And you made the comment about people being hungry when they try to live on salads and fruit. So you really, to make this work, you need to eat squashes and potatoes and beets and your legumes and whole grains to make this work. So that's what my meals look like every day.
Pam, your 4 groups left out nuts and seeds. Do you let people eat nuts and seeds?
Yeah, that's further up in the pyramid, and one of the ways that we have people eat nuts and seeds is when they're part of dishes, like not a like everyday have some, but yeah, they can use them when they're part of dishes that they're making, or they come on foods that they order in restaurants and that sort of thing. So we don't restrict them entirely.
Well, just to make it clear, the Seventh-day Adventist studies, as well as corroborative evidence from every other study looking at the issue, show that as you divided nuts and seeds into 5 different quintiles, the lowest quintile of nut and seed consumption had a approximately 40% increased risk of cardiovascular death and about a 29% increase in all-cause mortality compared to the highest quintile of nut and seed consumption, which was consuming about 1.5 ounces a day. So when they compared people eating about a half of an ounce or less, or a third of an ounce or less on the average, compared to people eating over 1 ounce a day, it was pretty remarkable differences in longevity for people excluding fat from their diets so aggressively. And of course, the type of fat we're talking about is that nuts and seeds don't just prevent against cardiovascular arrhythmia, but they also protect against powerfully anti-cancerous effects as well. Just thought I'd throw that in. So the dietary style I design includes advising people to have a salad at least once a day, and then instead of using an oil-based dressing on a salad, to use a dressing made from some nuts and seeds in place of oil. Of course, we're not snacking on nuts and seeds. We don't want to have an unlimited amount of them because we want people to be aware of their overall caloric need and not exceeding their caloric needs. We want them to have at least 1 serving a day of beans, 1 serving a day of salad, and maybe a vegetable bean soup. That's whereas I want to make the lunch the most important meal of the day, and I want people to memorize the lunch. They could modify their dinner and breakfast and make and change it around. For breakfast, they can have juice or fruit or something, or they can have a smoothie, or they can have some steel-cut oats or quinoa, or they can have a squash soup, or whatever it is they're having. And dinner could be modified to something else, and it could be a tomato sauce, or it could be a vegetable wok, or it could be a lot of different things. But the lunch, I want the lunch to be pretty consistent, so I know people are getting these basic, powerfully anti-cancer foods in. So I want them to have a big salad every day for the lunch, for what they chew really well, with some raw cruciferous on top, with a dressing made from nuts and seeds, not oil, because that facilitates the absorption of the anti-cancer compounds, even as much as 20 to 50-fold increased absorption of carotenoids and other fat-soluble nutrients in the food when you compare it to eating a salad with no fat, that meal with no fat in it. And then they have a bowl of vegetable bean soup, a hearty serving of some kind of, because beans are very, very longevity protective, and on a scale of carbohydrate hierarchy, of which has the most anti-cancer longevity promoting effects, beans seem to have the most documented effects at lowering rates of cancer and extending human life, and they have the most resistant starch, have the most fiber, have the most phytochemicals, have the most nutrient density. So we want people to get a good portion of that, at least once a day, of that bean serving of a chili or a bean dish or a soup or a stew or something with their salad and a piece of fruit for dessert. So I'm more flexible with breakfast and dinner. I want people to, as Alan said, to have that extended period of fasting at night where they eat an earlier and a lighter dinner, so they have that at least the 14 hours in, and really stress the fact we don't want people to go to sleep on a full stomach. We want them to go to sleep on an empty stomach, so we want them to eat dinner early enough so they digest before they go to bed at night, or eat a light enough dinner. If they can't eat early, then make dinner lighter so you still don't go to sleep with a lot of food and heavy to digest food in your stomach. You eat your lunch as your main meal of the day.
If you would each make a 1-minute closing statement on any final thoughts you have for the evening.
I guess my 1-minute closing statement is that as human beings, we are plant eaters, and that the greatest health is found in eating a diet that is comprised of the greatest diversity of plant foods. And, because people always ask me, well, what's the one thing I should eat? What is the one? No. Every different whole plant food, just like every different person in this room, has something wonderful and valuable to offer. And so, as many different plant foods as you can include in your diet, the healthier you will be, and the more disease resistance. So remember, variety and diversity is truly the spice of life. Eat a diverse, whole food, plant-based diet.
Agreed. I think my closing statement would be that everybody here agrees that a whole foods, plant-based diet is the best. And I think we should focus on the things that we have in common, not the things that we have differences of opinion about. And if you really look closely, the things that we have differences of opinion about are based on the different audiences that we serve. And I'll keep coming back to this issue that we've got to invite more people into the tent, because we got to get to the place where someday we're going to congregate here, and instead of 2.5% of the people eating a health-promoting diet, it's going to be 27% of the people. And then it's easier to get to 35 and 50 and 75 and all the way home. So focus on the important big ideas we're sharing. Don't get so lost in the weeds.
My last statement will be a statement of hope and of and optimism, and that my message is always that I want people to know that they don't have to suffer with medical conditions for the rest of their life, that they're told by the regular doctors that they have to be sick forever, or have happened to them what happens to other Americans. You don't have to suffer with autoimmune conditions, that your body is a miraculous self-healing machine when fed ideally and optimally, and we have the ability today to use nutritional science in a selected and targeted fashion to help people get well from most chronic, serious medical conditions. And we can live a life free of fear of cancer, heart attacks, strokes, or dementia. And that opportunity is now available for all.
So health results from healthful living. Healthful living involves diet, sleep, and exercise. So The diet that we advocate is a whole plant food, SOS-free diet. Exercise should be abundant and enjoyable, and sleep should be bountiful so that you can wake spontaneously feeling refreshed.